people of the cave, the mystery of the 309-year sleep. In a kingdom ruled by fear, a king thought he was a god. But in the shadows, 5 young boys, guided by faith, dared to challenge the lie, fleeing injustice. They found refuge in a cave, and there, a miracle happened. Allah plunged them into a sleep for 309 years, plus 9 years to honor the loyalty of their dog. When they awoke, the world had changed, their people, their king, their homes. Everything was gone. They had become an eternal sign, a living testimony to the power of Allah and the faithfulness of those who sincerely seek Him. This is the story of the people of the cave, a story of faith, courage, and miracle. A story that transcends time and whose secret still lies hidden in the depths of the Ghayb. The people of the cave were actually 5 young boys accompanied by their dog. However, the majority of Islamic scholars maintain that there were 7 of them, based on the profound subtleties of Arabic grammar. The logic that led these scholars to this number is rooted in the analysis of Quranic formulations and their linguistic implications. For every word of the Holy Book contains wisdom and a subtle indication. These young people lived in a territory dominated by a tyrannical king, whose cruelty spread like a heavy shadow over his entire reign. This wicked man sowed injustice and oppression, and he did not hesitate at times to have some of its inhabitants publicly brought to be mistreated before a crowd. On other occasions, he had them put to death for no apparent reason. He acted according to his desires, driven by a boundless sense of superiority. This king, similar to Pharaoh in his arrogance, inwardly considered himself a divinity, although he had not dared explicitly declare his divinity before his subjects. But his actions, his pride, and his behavior were reminiscent in every way of the attitude of the Pharaoh of old. He believed he held incomparable power and thus allowed himself every kind of abuse. To further assert his authority, he had his soldiers surround the village so that no one could leave without being watched. Anyone attempting to leave the city was immediately reported by his intelligence agents, and anyone entering was similarly observed. This constant surveillance gradually plunged the entire population into a state of profound terror. The inhabitants trembled at the mere sight of the king and dreaded even the mere mention of his name. It was in this oppressive context that Allah, in His infinite wisdom, strengthened faith in the hearts of some young people. Thus, 4 of them began to question each other, recognizing inwardly that this king could not be a deity, for there must necessarily be a supreme being above him. One said to his companions, "I saw him complaining of headaches. He seemed sad and tired." Another replied, "I saw him lose his cap, and he had to pick it up with the help of others. If he were truly God, this should not have happened to him." A third added, "I saw his foot injured." And a fourth declared, "I saw him stumble and fall at the entrance to his room." These young people therefore concluded, with growing certainty, that this king was not a deity. They then decided to seek the true God, convinced that everything they saw came from the will of the Supreme Creator, the one who had fashioned the heavens and the earth, and who had created them as well as this king. At the time they were debating these luminous truths, there were 4 of them. Little by little, their words began to spread among the people. Some, moved by fear or flattery, went to report their words to the king, informing him that these young men were discussing to deny his authority and challenge his power. The king then summoned them and said arrogantly, "If it weren't for the fact that you work so hard in my fields and cultivate what is useful to the people, I would have had you brought before the crowd and put to death one by one. I have heard that you are beginning to doubt my authority. So return to work until the end of the rainy season." These 4 young men were indeed farmers employed in the king's fields. But one of them said to his companions, "We know this king's attitude. The only thing that prevented him from killing us is that we cultivate his land. But the day the harvest is finished and we bring it to him, that will be the day he will order our execution. So it is better to flee before it is too late." They then began to discuss a plan to escape and wondered about the best course of action. Finally, they decided to resort to an ingenious stratagem. They began throwing balls, one after the other, pretending to be playing. They repeated this several times until they reached the village exit gate. There, the security guards called out to them. "Where are you going?" They confidently replied, "We're playing, as you can see. Once our game is over, we'll return to the village." The guards, fooled by this apparent distraction, actually believed they were just having fun. So the four young men continued their game, moving away little by little until they were far enough away from any surveillance. Thus, they began their escape, guided by divine providence. Just when they thought no one could see them, a shepherd was leading his flock toward the village. It was then that the four young men began to chat among themselves. One of them said, "Since there is only one person, this shepherd, we must kill and bury him. That way, no one can denounce us." But another, more thoughtful, replied, "We are searching for the truth, searching for God, and you already want to shed blood? If we kill this shepherd, we will become like the unjust king we are fleeing, for we would be committing the same crime as him." A third added, "Yes, if we kill him, we will be undermining justice, for this shepherd is the custodian of property that does not belong to him. His flock belongs to others. Killing him would therefore be a double crime, an injustice to him and an injustice to those who entrusted their animals to him." So the young people wondered how to act against him, fearing he would denounce them. The shepherd, who had heard them, approached and said, "I have heard all your words, but among them one particularly touched me, the one concerning the search for the Lord. Know that I share the same quest as you, for in my work as a shepherd in the forests I have witnessed many signs and wonders. Now, if I were to report these visions to the king's secretary so that he could convey them to the sovereign, he would be unable to interpret them, for this king knows nothing beyond the walls of his chamber. This king is not God. That is why I, too, seek the Lord." The four young men, however, remained suspicious, doubting the sincerity of his words. "You surely want to trap us," they told him. The shepherd replied, "No, I do not want to betray you at all. But if I want to go in search of God, I must first return the goods entrusted to me. For I cannot claim to seek the Lord while keeping for myself what belongs to others. The flock I lead is not mine. If I leave without returning it to its owners, how can I hope to find the Lord? Injustice closes the path to him." Then the youngest of the four burst out laughing. The shepherd asked him, "Why are you laughing?" "Because what you say is reasonable," he replied. "But how can we believe that you won't take this opportunity to denounce us? If you return to the village, perhaps you will alert the guard who will come and capture us. The king would then reward you." Yet everyone knew that this shepherd had one peculiarity. When he swore, he never lied. So they warned him, "Don't disappoint us. We trust you. But if you betray us and bring the guard, know that we have the strength to flee. And in that case, the king wouldn't spare you. He would kill you." The shepherd reaffirmed his sincerity. "I have no intention of betraying you." So he returned to the village and returned the flocks to their owners. But on the way, the royal guard intercepted him. "Where are you going?" they asked him. "Since you've just returned your flock?" "I counted the animals," he replied, "but 2 are missing. I'm going to look for them." "Hurry up," they said, "before we tell the king." To reassure them, he called his dog so they would believe he was really returning to look for the stray animals. Then he set off again and joined the 4 young men who were waiting for him. When they saw him return with his dog, they wondered, why is he coming with his dog? Perhaps he has given up seeking God and is returning to the village. But when he arrived, he said to them, "Let's go seek God." "No," they replied, "we will not go with you because of your dog. We cannot seek the Lord with a dog." Then the shepherd turned to the animal, placed his hand on its head, and said, "We have lived together for 9 years. You have always helped me in my work as a shepherd. But now I must seek the Lord. So return to the village and continue tending the flocks." The dog did not move. The shepherd continued on his way, but the animal still followed him. The young men insisted, "Speak to him again. He must leave us." Then the shepherd repeated the same words. It was at that moment that God granted this dog the miracle of speech, as he had once done with the prophet Noah's dog. The dog raised its head and said, "Listen to me, master. If these 3 men seek God, I will be the 4th. If there are 5, I will be the 6th. If there are 7, I will be the 8th. This statement resonated throughout the invisible world, Ghayb, and was recorded in the heavenly manual because of its grandeur. And God, who made the dog speak, elevated this statement to the point of inscribing it in the Quran. For when he speaks of the people of the cave, he says, "Some will say they were 3 and their dog was the 4th. Others will say they were 5 and their dog the 6th. Still others will say they were 7 and their dog the 8th. Scholars, basing their arguments on grammar, concluded that there were 7 of them and the dog the 8th. But in reality, God repeated the dog's words in his book, for the Quran is neither grammar nor conjugation. It is the divine word. Thus, the dog was joined by God in the search for the Lord. He became their true companion. Thus there were 5 men and 1 dog, 6 beings in total, when they took refuge in the cave to meditate and worship their Lord. The dog, aware of his role, chose to lie down at the entrance of the cave to protect them. The Quran even describes how he lay with his paws outstretched guarding the entrance while his companions remained inside. Then God plunged them into a miraculous sleep. They slept for 309 years. During this long rest, their bodies received the sun's rays every day. At sunrise, it touched them on one side, and at sunset, it touched them on the other, transmitting vital energy to them. The Quran states they remained in their cave for 300 years, to which were added 9. Scholars have explained that the 300 years correspond to solar years, and the additional 9 to lunar years. But another wisdom lies hidden within. These 9 years recall the faithfulness of the dog, the shepherd's companion for 9 years, which God honored by associating it with the number. This is why Allah made them sleep for 300 years, and He added 9 years to honor the faithfulness of their dog. This miracle of the people of the cave spread like a light throughout the village after they awoke. One day, one of them, awoke by divine will, then awakened his companions, saying, "We seek our Lord, and we remain here sleeping." So they asked one another, "How long have we been sleeping?" One of them replied, "Perhaps a day, or part of the night." They were unaware that they had actually slept for 300 years, to which Allah had added 9 more. And yet, when they awoke, they believed they had simply fallen asleep the previous evening and would wake up at sunrise. This phenomenon is reminiscent of what will happen on the day of resurrection. A person who has lived 100 years on earth will believe, on that day that he has spent only one morning or one evening on earth, as mentioned in the Quran. Upon waking, they consulted their provisions and wondered if they still had any money. They then appointed one of them to go and buy something to eat. When he presented his silver coin so that they could sell him some food, the inhabitants were astonished, for this currency was unknown to them. It belonged to another time, another century. They told him, "This money has not been in circulation for a long time." But the man replied, "That's not possible. I received it myself in a shop yesterday." It was then that he understood that the village had completely changed. Citing the name of the king who had once hunted them, they replied, "This king, as well as his descendants, have been dead for many generations." Astonished, he asked, "How can this be?" And the people said to him, "Where do you come from, you who are carrying money belonging to our very distant ancestors?" He then returned to the cave with his companions and their dog, and they told everyone about the miracle they had witnessed. The king of that time, having heard of their return, went to the scene. He knew that such a story had been circulating for centuries in his kingdom, without imagining that it would one day manifest itself before his eyes. The king said to them reverently, "Is it you then whom Allah has resurrected from the dead?" They replied, "Yes, it is indeed us." Then the king, amazed, asked them to pray for him and his people, for they had become a living sign of Allah's power. And it was in this very place where they invoked Allah for the community that the Lord took their souls, sealing their spiritual mission. The king then gathered all his people and ordered that this blessed place, the cave, be venerated in memory of the miracle and the faithfulness of those whom Allah had chosen as a sign of His omnipotence.